Okay, imagine this. The IRS. You know, the agency handling millions and millions of tax returns, dealing with incredibly complex laws, providing services we all rely on.
Yeah, it's massive.
Now, picture that same agency going through these huge, really rapid shifts in its workforce. Not just once, but like boom, 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 big changes back to back.
Hmm.
And it's not just abstract numbers we're talking about. It's really about the gears of government, how they turn, and frankly, the direct impact on every single one of us.
Absolutely. So today we're going to do a deep dive into that, well, really surprising story. It's often contradictory, this whole narrative around the IRS workforce.
Contradictory how?
Well, we'll unpack why this agency, so critical, right, struggled with hiring for years.
Mm-hmm.
Then suddenly it launched into this really ambitious growth phase,
Okay.
only to then face these sweeping reductions almost immediately after. It's quite the roller coaster.
Wow.
And really the core question is, what do these dramatic changes actually mean? For the IRS itself, its operations, its employees, and maybe most importantly for you, the taxpayer.
And where are we getting our info for this?
It's straight from the source, really. We're looking at official reports, detailed audits from TGT, that's the Treasury Inspector General for Tax Administration.
Right, the watchdog.
Exactly. Plus economic analyses from the CBO, the Congressional Budget Office, and we're even digging into some of the, candid conversations happening within the federal employee community, getting a feel for the ground level.
Okay, good mix.
Yeah. So our mission here is basically to navigate this really complex landscape. We want to bring you the most important bits of knowledge, maybe some surprising facts along the way.
And help everyone understand what's really going on behind the scenes with federal hiring and tax administration.
Precisely. In a way that, makes sense and actually sticks.
All right, let's dive in. Segment 1, the staffing roller coaster. Where do we start? The decline.
Yeah, let's set the stage. For years, really, the IRS saw this significant drop in its workforce, a big one.
How big are we talking?
We're talking numbers like falling from roughly 94,000 employees back in fiscal year 2010 down to about 80,000 by FY 2020. That's what, 14,000 fewer people?
Yeah, that's a huge chunk. And that must have really hurt their ability to function.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
It directly impacted their capacity to fulfill their mission. Less people means less work gets done, slower service.
So then came the pendulum swing you mentioned, the funding boost.
Exactly. So in response to that decline, the Inflation Reduction Act of 2022, the IRA, provided this really substantial injection of funds. We're talking nearly $80 billion allocated over 10 years.
Wow, $80 billion. That's serious money.
It is, though it's really crucial to remember that about $21.6 billion of that initial amount was later rescinded, taken aback.
Ah, okay. So not the full amount stayed.
Right. But a key part of that initial funding was specifically meant to, well, supercharge hiring, get more people in the door, especially in critical areas like tax enforcement, taxpayer service, and IT.
And they set some pretty ambitious goals for that hiring push, didn't they?
They did. The IRS was aiming for this big collaborative strategy, trying to meet taxpayer needs better. And they had this specific, really aggressive target.
The 80-day hiring time.
That's the one. Reduce the average time it takes to hire someone from start to finish down to just 80 calendar days.
That sounds fast, especially for the federal government.
It is very fast.
Yeah.
And they definitely ramped up the volume between October 2021 and September 2023. So covering fiscal years 22 and 23, the IRS made almost 53,000 new hires.
53,000 in
Yeah.
2 years.
Yeah. Think about that volume. It was a huge jump, like a 41% increase in hiring from FY22 to FY23 alone. They were absolutely trying to staff up big time.
Okay, so the volume was there, but did they hit that 80-day target? You hinted it was maybe a mixed bag.
Yeah, that's where it gets interesting. It was definitely a mixed bag. The TGT reports, looking at those 53,000 hires, well, despite the hiring surge, they really struggled with that 80-day goal.
How so?
Well, while a lot of hires, about 2/3 did meet the target, and pretty quickly too, averaging around 46 days.
Okay, that's good.
But the other third, that's almost 19,000 new employees, significantly missed the target.
How badly did they miss it?
Their average hiring time was 124 days. So over 4 months instead of under 3. That points to some real bottlenecks, some serious friction in their hiring pipeline.
Right. So, okay, let's unpack that. If they were trying so hard to hire, what was actually slowing things down for, almost 19,000 people?
Yeah, that's the crucial question, isn't it? And TGT, the Inspector General, they dug into exactly this. Their audit from September 2024 pinpointed several sort of systemic reasons.
Like what?
Things like just overwhelming workloads on the HR staff, miscommunication between different departments involved in hiring, these unexpectedly long security check processes we can talk more about,
Okay.
and just fundamental limitations within the IRS's own hiring management systems. The tech wasn't keeping up.
Can we break down those delays a bit more? Like, where was the time going?
Sure. TGT found that for typical external hires, just the first step, HR specialists reviewing applications, took an average of 44 calendar days.
44 days. Just to review applications, what was the target?
15 days.
Wow. So almost triple the target time.
Yeah. And then the next step, the selecting officials choosing who to interview or hire, that took an average of 28 days. Again, way over their 15-day target.
So just those two steps add up to over 70 days on average, already close to the 80-day total target.
Exactly. TIGTA estimated thousands of hires faced these specific delays. Almost 9,000 delayed at the application review stage, nearly 6,000 waiting longer for selections, just stuck in the pipeline.
And it sounds like it wasn't just procedural slowness, but maybe some human factors too. Training, resources.
Definitely. Interviews with the people actually doing the hiring officials, HR specialists, they reveal some real challenges. For instance, HR folks sometimes struggle to identify the right qualified candidates for different parts of the IRS.
What do you mean?
They ended up having to create what they called rebuilt candidate certificates, basically scrapping the initial list of potential hires and starting over because the first batch wasn't quite right for the specific division's needs.
That sounds incredibly inefficient.
It is. Plus, newer HR specialists felt their initial training just wasn't enough to handle the complexity. And a huge issue, kind of shocking really, was outdated reference materials.
Like manuals and guides.
Yeah, some key internal revenue manuals hadn't been updated since FY 2010. Desk guides were referencing old hiring systems that weren't even used anymore and had broken links. Imagine trying to hire quickly using instructions that are over a decade old and point to dead ends.
That's a recipe for delay and confusion.
Absolutely.
You mentioned security checks earlier as a bottleneck. That seems critical for IRS jobs. What happened there?
Right, this was a big one. TGTA looked at a sample of hires who went over the 80-day target. Of those needing initial security checks, which was most of them,
Yeah.
a staggering 97%, almost all of them, blew past the 10 calendar day target for completing those checks.
97%. By how much?
On average, they exceeded the target by 40 days, just for the initial security check.
40 days. Wow. So what was causing that delay?
TGT found it was primarily issues with fingerprinting. Getting fingerprints collected, processed, cleared. It just took way too long for thousands of hires. An estimated 8,300 plus experienced these delays.
Why the fingerprinting issues?
It seems like a mix of things. Unclear instructions in the workflow, maybe confusion about who was responsible for what step, and also there was a temporary surge in fingerprinting volume after the COVID-19 pandemic deferral option ended in early 2022. The system just got overwhelmed.
So procedural issues compounded by a sudden spike in demand.
Seems like it. And adding to all this was the technology behind the background checks themselves.
The ABI system you mentioned.
Yeah, the automated background investigation system. It's an old legacy system. Think limited integration with other HR tools, meaning lots of manual data entry.
Which means more chances for errors and delays.
Exactly. They were expecting a replacement called Web ABS around October 2024. But for this period we're talking about, the old system was definitely contributing to the inefficiency.
And what about the main hiring platform, USA Staffing? That's used across the government, right? Did that cause problems too?
It did present its own challenges, yes. USA Staffing is owned by OPM, the Office of Personnel Management. TGTA found it required a lot of manual entry, again leading to user errors.
Okay.
And crucially, it lacked a common unique identifier. Basically, there was no easy way to link a candidate's record in USA Staffing directly to their record in other key HR systems like HR Connect or the Treasury's main system.
So tracking someone through the whole process was difficult. Lots of manual matching.
Very difficult.
Yeah.
And prone to data quality issues. TGD found things like duplicated records, thousands of records with blank fields where critical dates should have been, even hundreds of records where the dates just didn't make sense chronologically. It makes accurate tracking and reporting a nightmare.
Man, it sounds like a perfect storm of procedural delays, outdated resources, tech limitations, and data issues.
It really paints a picture of an agency trying to run a marathon with weights tied to its ankles, doesn't it?
Yeah. But you mentioned the IRS is aware of this. They've agreed to TGTA's recommendations.
Yes, that's the positive takeaway here. The IRS Human Capital Officer formally agreed with Tigita's 4 main recommendations.
What are they doing?
They've stated they're actively transforming their hiring operation to be more customer-centric, focusing on the experience of the applicant and the hiring manager. They're updating those outdated reference materials, clarifying the fingerprinting timelines for applicants so people know what to expect,
Good.
and they've officially requested automation enhancements for USA staffing from OPM, trying to address those system limitations we talked about. So steps are being taken at least as of late 2024.
Okay, so they're working on fixing the hiring pipeline, but then the story takes another sharp turn, right?
Oh boy, does it ever. This is where it gets, as you said, really interesting and, quite dramatic. Just as the IRS was seemingly making progress, trying to rebuild after years of decline,
What happened?
a whole new set of directives came down, basically slammed the brakes on and threw things into reverse.
You mean the hiring freeze?
Exactly. January 2025, an executive order comes out imposing a federal hiring freeze across government. And it's specifically called out pausing the hiring of new IRS agents.
Pausing. Or stopping.
Well, it paused new hiring and rescinded job offers that had already been made if the start date was after February 8th. Imagine getting a job offer, maybe quitting your old job, and then having it pulled back.
Ouch. Were there any exceptions?
The order noted exceptions for roles related to immigration enforcement, national security, or public safety. But for many potential IRS hires, the door just slammed shut.
And this freeze was part of something bigger.
Yeah, it was framed as part of this broader presidential initiative called the Department of Government Efficiency, or DOGE. The stated goal was to significantly reduce the size of the federal workforce.
Reduce. So not just freezing hiring, but actual cuts.
Actual cuts, and fast. By March 2025, just a couple of months after the freeze, over 11,000 IRS employees had already separated from the agency.
11,000.
It was a mix. A large number came from terminating probationary employees and also through an initial voluntary program called the Deferred Resignation Program, or DRP.
11,000 people is huge. That's like 11% of their workforce gone in, what, 2 months? Based on the roughly 103,000 they had in February 2025.
That's right, an 11% reduction very quickly.
Let's talk about those probationary terminations. That sounds messy.
It became very messy and legally complicated. Around 7,300 probationary employees, these are usually folks in their first year or two, with less job security received termination notices by February.
Yep.
But then a federal court in Maryland stepped in. In March, it ordered their reinstatement.
So they got their jobs back.
Not quite. The IRS responded by placing these reinstated employees on administrative leave, basically paid leave, but not working.
What happened next?
Well, the legal battle went higher. In April 2025, the U.S. Supreme Court issued a tentative stop on the rehiring of these probationary employees across the federal government, pending further review. So their ultimate status became very unclear, caught in this legal limbo.
Wow. Huge uncertainty for thousands of people.
Immense uncertainty. And alongside these involuntary actions, the IRS rolled out more voluntary separation options.
Trying to encourage more people to leave.
Seems that way. They offered another Treasury Deferred Resignation Program, TDRP, similar to the first one, plus things like a voluntary separation incentive payment, basically a buyout and voluntary early retirement authority, letting eligible people retire sooner than planned.
Did many people take these offers?
Quite a few. By late April 2025, over 13,000 employees had been approved for that second DRP, the TDRP, and that was out of 23,000 who applied for it.
So combined with the earlier separations, the total reduction must have been significant by then.
Very significant. We're talking deep cuts across the agency.
Were these cuts spread evenly, or did some areas get hit harder?
That's a key point. They were definitely not uniform. Certain critical jobs and whole business units took a much bigger hit.
Like which ones?
Revenue agents, for example. These are the highly trained folks who handle complex audits of individuals and businesses. Nearly a third of them, 31%, over 3,600 employees separated.
A third of revenue agents? That sounds devastating for enforcement. Didn't you say they brought in billions?
They did. Just in FY23, their work recommended about $32 billion in additional tax assessments. Losing that level of expertise and capacity is a massive blow to the IRS's ability to audit complex returns and address the tax gap.
Any other key roles impacted?
Yes. Revenue officers who handle collection cases saw an 18% reduction. Contact representatives, the people you talk to on the phone or assistance centers, saw a 10% cut, so hits to both enforcement and service.
And which business units felt it most?
The reductions were really stark in some units. Tax-exempt and government entities, TEG, lost 31% of its staff. Large business and international, LB&I, lost 25%. Small business self-employed, SBSE, lost 23%. These are the divisions dealing with major parts of the economy and tax system.
So the cuts seem concentrated in areas dealing with complex tax issues and enforcement.
That appears to be the case, yeah. And the cuts didn't stop there. Further reductions in force RIFs, basically layoffs, were initiated in April 2025.
More layoffs. Where?
Targeting offices like civil rights and compliance, the one was slated for a huge 75% reduction. Also hitting taxpayer experience offices and equity, diversity, and inclusion roles within taxpayer services.
Okay. And I think I read something about IT staff, too.
Yes, that was another interesting move. Around 48 senior information technology employees were placed on administrative leave.
Why?
The rationale given was that these were primarily non-technical staff who were in technical decision-making roles. Leadership apparently viewed removing them as a way to improve the performance of the IRS IT functions, perhaps by streamlining decision-making.
Okay, so hiring freeze, mass separations, voluntary buyouts, targeted RIFs, putting senior IT staff on leave. It's just relentless change.
Relentless is a good word for it, a period of intense, rapid downsizing and restructuring.
Which brings us to the big question. So what? What does all of this chaos, this shrinking workforce, actually mean for us, for taxpayers, and for the economy?
Yeah, let's connect the dots to the bigger picture. The Congressional Budget Office, the CBO, they've done projections on this. They basically say changes in IRS funding directly impact how much tax revenue the government actually collects.
Makes sense. Fewer agents, less enforcement, less money comes in.
Pretty much. For example, remember that $20 billion rescission of IRA funding we talked about?
Yeah.
CBO projected that specific cut could reduce overall tax revenues by $44 billion over the next decade.
Wait, so cutting $20 billion loses $44 billion?
That's the projection.
Yeah.
And it would increase the cumulative deficit by $24 billion over that same period. If the cut was larger, say $35 billion rescinded, CBO projected $89 billion in lost revenues and a $54 billion increase in the deficit.
That's a negative return on investment, to put it mildly.
Hugely negative. One analysis even projected a potential revenue loss of $1 trillion over 10 years because of reduced enforcement capacity resulting from these kinds of cuts.
$1 trillion? That's astronomical.
It highlights the scale of potential impact. Now, the CBO does have a benchmark return on investment, or ROI, for IRS enforcement. They estimated it at about 6.4 to 1.
Meaning every dollar spent on enforcement brings in $6.40.
That's the benchmark, yes. Though CBO is careful to note that this ROI likely diminishes as you invest more and more. The IRS naturally goes after the easiest, highest return cases first, and taxpayers might change their behavior in response to new enforcement too.
Okay, so it's not infinitely scalable, but the basic principle holds. Enforcement spending tends to pay for itself, and then some.
Generally, yes. That's what the nonpartisan analyses suggest.
So less money for the government is one impact. What about direct services to taxpayers?
That's likely to be hit hard too. We heard from former acting IRS Commissioner Douglas O'Donnell, who called these workforce reductions unprecedented.
Unprecedented.
His words. And he predicted they will lead to diminished capabilities across the board in core services. Things you rely on.
Like what specifically?
Processing tax returns and refunds, expect delays. Getting help on the phone, expect longer waits or maybe fewer calls answered. Getting face-to-face help at taxpayer assistance centers, expect reduced hours or availability. And audits or examinations will likely take significantly longer to complete.
So basically, everything gets slower and harder for the average taxpayer trying to comply or get help.
That's the logical consequence, yes. And there's another potential impact: more legal friction.
How so?
With fewer staff to work through issues or conduct thorough audits up front, the IRS might end up issuing more notices of deficiency.
Those are the formal letters saying, we think you owe more money.
Exactly. And if you disagree, your main recourse is to challenge it in U.S. tax court. So a staffing shortage could actually force more taxpayers, individuals, and businesses into potentially costly legal battles.
That doesn't sound good. And what about the people still working at the IRS? All this churn must affect them.
Hugely. There's a massive concern about the loss of institutional knowledge. This isn't just about numbers, it's about experience.
How bad is the experience drain?
Well, consider this. About a third of the current IRS workforce is already nearing retirement eligibility. Another 37% become eligible within the next 5 years.
So a huge wave of potential retirements was coming anyway.
Exactly. And these deep cuts, especially losing experienced staff like revenue agents through voluntary programs or RIFs, just makes that looming void in the management and leadership ranks even worse. and happen faster.
And new hires can't just instantly replace that experience, right?
Not at all. TGT reports and IRS experience show it takes years for new hires to become fully effective, maybe 2 years just to be marginally effective in a complex role. So losing seasoned staff now has long-term consequences for training, mentorship, and handling complex cases.
This must be terrible for morale, too.
You hear a lot of concern from federal employee groups, reports of low morale, real fears about mass firings, worries about outsourcing core federal work. It creates a pretty anxious environment.
And that probably makes it harder to recruit good people in the future, doesn't it? Who wants to join an agency that seems unstable?
It definitely could. It potentially damages the pipeline for attracting qualified individuals, not just to the IRS, but maybe to government service more broadly, if this is seen as the new normal.
So, faced with fewer people, what's the plan? Just do less.
Well, there are reports the IRS is trying to hire in some specific areas, like planning to bring on over 11,000 call center representatives likely to handle the basic service demands.
Okay, trying to plug that gap.
Yeah, but perhaps the bigger strategic shift is towards relying much more heavily on technology.
Ah, the tech solution, like AI.
Exactly. Reports suggest increased use of things like AI-based screening and other automation tools to try and streamline operations, make processes more efficient, and essentially compensate for having fewer human employees.
So, trying to fill the human gap with technology.
That seems to be a major part of the strategy going forward. Whether it can fully compensate remains to be seen.
Wow. Okay, so let's recap this whirlwind. We started with the IRS being understaffed for years due to budget cuts.
Right, a long period of decline.
Then a big injection of cash from the IRA aimed at ambitious hiring. But they immediately hit hurdles, procedural delays, tech issues, security backlogs.
A hiring surge that struggled to meet its own targets, yeah.
And just as they were trying to fix those problems, bam! A federal hiring freeze followed by rapid, deep workforce reductions driven by a new push for government efficiency.
Sweeping cuts, voluntary separations, RIFs, hitting key enforcement and service areas hard.
Leading to potential impacts like huge revenue losses for the government, diminished service for taxpayers, loss of vital experience, and low morale.
And a pivot towards relying more heavily on technology, like AI, to try and bridge the gap left by fewer people. This constant flux, this back and forth, it just creates so much uncertainty.
It really does. Which leads to, I guess, a final thought to leave people with. As the IRS makes this significant pivot, fewer people, more tech, how might these really dramatic internal shifts ultimately reshape the fundamental relationship between us, the taxpayers, and our government?
That's a deep question. What does it mean for the clarity, the fairness, the actual effectiveness of our tax system when the human element is reduced and the technological one increased so rapidly?
Yeah. What does that future look like? Something to definitely keep thinking about.